Greta. I said, oh, what are we eating?
Salad. Those salad kits from Aldi where it's like, they give you all the stuff to put in it.
Oh, yeah.
Love it.
As-
Perfect. So
and-
My salad intake has grown exponentially when they created those.
Right?
yeah, it's like party in a box.
Party in a box.
I
Except
This
just
is
have
the
a
salad in a bag.
omega-3 mix from Orchard Valley.
Ooh.
Just my little nuts to get me through for the while. But
You can have nuts at school? Wow.
yeah.
We can
Yeah.
too. We just are very careful about like not carrying them with us into the classroom.
Hey,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
at my little desk in the corner.
Yep.
There we go.
We won't tell Greta. It's okay.
I guess my thing is that I used to eat lunch in my PE room. So
Oh.
that was a note. I couldn't have nuts there. So
Oh, well, maybe I need to ask that question, Sarah.
I'm sorry. I'm
Now
sorry.
it's out on the internet too. I'm gonna be in trouble. Uh-oh. Sorry. Anybody? Okay.
You want me to edit that out?
No, that's fine. I'm okay. We only have a few days left. We're good. Actually, I don't have any parent ed after this. I don't have, we're done with my parent ed room. So
You're set. No
Just me
problem.
in here now.
No problem.
Okay.
Susan, the family day is still going on, not finished yet. I thought you were in that.
It's a second thing. Well, they'll probably have events all day. I don't know, but the IFFD had a thing that started an hour ago on them versus the UN. So
Yeah, I
How
was
did it
in
go?
that.
I had class. How did it go?
Oh, it is very good. I cried. I mean, gosh, it was so exciting. Well, I never heard this organization before, and they are doing, I'm very curious right now. I mean, what they are doing, what is the courses? I mean, they talk about family, summer camps of family academy, right? They talk about the family without borders. They talk about the role of the father. And, so this sounds so interesting. I want to know what they are doing.
I think their website is iffd.org. So they're world. I mean, they're global. I don't know what their funding stream is, but they're an NGO. So yeah, I mean, I'm interested in, so Olivier, who was the moderator, right? So he's the president of that. He's from the Ivory Coast. Yeah, and I know that they have like parenting education programs that they do, but I really don't know about the models, like what the pedagogy is and, what their outcomes are and that sort of thing. But it went okay, at the last minute. So this is another Zoom thing, right? I had prepared my presentation, but I had notes and I practiced it because I had to keep it down on time. And of course, I'm like presenting mega policy. And anyway, and so I had very concise presenter notes that would like keep me focused. And I checked on Zoom where about presenting and where you can, because I didn't know if you could use the presenter view with Zoom. And it said, sure you can, just like in a classroom. So I thought, great, that way they'll see the slide, I'll see my notes, we'll be all good. And then we all connected ahead of time to just check connections. And so I checked this and they could see my notes, not the slide. And I know that there's a way, because this has happened to me in the classroom, right? And like, this is where my students are way more savvy about this than I am. And they'll just go over there and click this and that'll be the reverse mirror thing, whatever. Well, at this point though, like they were saying, we just want the slides and I didn't know how to fix it. So it's just like, okay, we'll just go with the slides and Susan will have no notes. So at the end of it, there were, I would say sort of minor level points, but things that I'm sorry I didn't bring out, but the major stuff got there. So you just never know, right? You're always And I even had my second laptop set up so that I could read the notes, but that would have taken way more coordination to be clicking on 2 different computers at the same time. So anyway. But so it was okay. It was good. You know, the last one we did on work and family balance, there were only 2 speakers. And so there was a lot of time for Q&A. And I really like Q&A because of course I get to be opinionated and like make all of these other connections. But with this one, there were 4 other speakers. And so by the time there were only like 15 minutes left. So they just sort of pulled individual questions. But then I was just on Facebook and I saw that a number of the people also had posted their questions on Facebook. So I could write much longer responses. So yeah, anyway, so that's that. And now I get to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning on Saturday to Sunday to speak for 10 minutes about the variation on family use and impact of technology for a conference in Warsaw.
Can't you just do a recording and they hit play?
Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah. Oh, and this is what makes it even screwier is that this is like one of these, it's a day-long event. And so they have 1 panel and then they have a break and then they have another panel. Well, I'm in panel 2. And so that would mean that I could connect with the thing at 6 a.m. Right. And that's just like, well, that's not horrible, you know, for Sunday morning, it's horrible, but that's okay. You know, I can do that. But then they said, no, we're using, I think Google Meets anyway, they're using some technology that everybody needs to, who's going to be on, has to log in at the beginning and like keep your computer on. So I can't even join this and get a few more hours of sleep. And if I join them like at 2 a.m. and then like fall asleep, I'll probably sleep through the alarm. So anyway, but yes, that would be ideal. Anyway, so how are you guys doing? How was your week?
I don't know about you guys. I am so ready to be done. Like this May is always, sometimes I feel like excited and supercharged and, you know, like, oh, we're finishing it up. And I am just slogging to the finish line. I don't know about you, but.
Well, I just realized we usually do like the last day, we walk to City Park that's 3 blocks away and do a fun little thing at the end of the year. And we are doing that. We're not doing the picnic. We usually do a picnic. Everyone brings stuff, salads and all this great yummy food. And we're not doing that this year, but we're doing that. Normally, my last day, I do some sort of a fun, like, what are you going to do this summer? And we compile a list and all that stuff. And I have a already made list. I didn't do any of that. I totally forgot about it. I'm like, oh, shoot. I didn't do my routine of what I usually do. We did the evaluations, got that in, but I totally forgot to do like the party fun thing at the parent group for the last time. And
Send the list out and say, here's my parting gift.
there we
Happy
go.
summer.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. I'll just put a list together and send it out on Seesaw. We'll just do it that way. But so it's kind of weird. It's like, boom, here we are. And then we're done. It's good, but it's weird. Anyway, how about everybody else?
I'm ready to be done, but I have excitement building. Like, okay, summer's coming, and then I don't have to wear a mask anymore, and yay, summer's coming. But then I think, oh crap, fall's coming too. Where do I start with fall? Like, oh my gosh, I am so sick about talking about potty training, and I am so sick of talking about like child development, and I'm so sick of talking about this. So that's why I posed that question on our Facebook page, because I'm like, give me new like information. I know I have new families coming in and I need to talk about all this stuff, but I'm like, I need something new.
And that I think was part of why I'm so tired this fall or this spring, because, you know, by the time you get to spring, your groups have mostly, you're in the norm, like the forming stage, and they're getting along and they're great. But I have 2 classes this year, one brand new this spring. So I had to start all from scratch. So while I'm doing shame and guilt and all that kind of more fun stuff with my solidified groups, I'm back to the basics with these other groups. And then I have some groups that they don't know each other at all. So I'm just like, oh my gosh, you don't realize how far a group comes to the spring until they are fun topics, Susan, like shame and guilt, like Brene Brown's shame versus guilt. And how do you, you're right. I should have said deeper topics. But yeah,
So funny. I'm sorry. That's just so funny.
they,
Yay, shame and guilt. We get
shame and guilt, let's talk about shaming your children. Yeah. Deeper topic. You just don't realize how far your groups come until you have to backtrack in the spring. It just feels really weird. I'm like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. I think that's why I'm so tired. And last week I counted and I had 5 different topics across my 10 classes. Yeah, I'm just done.
10 classes. That's really good. I mean, Ellen, that's a lot of classes going. Wow. Bravo.
Yeah, I think that's back up to the usual speed. Usually we have 11 or 12. So yeah.
I only ended up to 5, but we usually have 10 to 12. So that's great. Bravo. Way to go.
This will be my first year as a teacher doing end of the year, because last year we didn't really have one.
Didn't happen.
No.
Okay, so this week it was up and down to me. I was so excited. I connected to Family Tree and they were willing to help me in Montana, right? So I scheduled the class on June 1st. And then also, I talked to the parents, they were so excited. And then I talked to the coordinator, and this coordinator said, oh, I like this idea and I need to talk to my boss and the director of the curriculum in the district. And then he came back to me, he said, okay, so the director of the curriculum, the district, he likes it too. However, he talked to the superintendent. The superintendent said no. Yeah, so the superintendent said he doesn't even want to touch this topic because the district offered sex ed in the classroom, and then some families against that, they stopped sending their children to the school. So he said he doesn't want to even open the camp worm right now. So and I said, oh my gosh, I do not want to cancel this. I spent so much effort, to make this. And I said, I need your personal advice. And he said, you know what? We are telling you not what we cannot do, but we're not telling you what you can do. So he said, I will like you said, you can cancel this class, and what on your personal area, what you can do, that's up to you. So okay, and then I officially canceled this class from the district, and then I sent invitation to the parents as from my personal email, right? So we invited them to the class. So that was the experience this week. Well,
but my question is, if parents were signing up for the class, were parents signing up for it?
Yeah. All the I have 5 family in this class, right? And everyone just loved it, and they so it's. These families, they are not going, they're not related to the family against that course. It's different, it's different.
But here's the thing, like, that I would argue with your superintendent, because, that's my place, right? Is those families who don't want sex ed in school, they're the ones who especially need this. It's your job as a parent to be the sex ed teacher, right? Like, that's the whole point of the class from Family Tree is parents as sexuality educators. So that's even doing the whole taking it out of the school and bringing it into the home, which is
Right.
their argument usually. Like, no, this is a mom and dad's job, not a school's job.
Well, and the parents who want to do the class will sign up for the class, and the parents who
Yeah.
don't won't sign up. I wouldn't have asked for anybody's. I would have asked for forgiveness instead of asking for permission. Sorry.
That seems just nuts to me that they don't want you to have that. I'm proud of you for coming up with a creative solution, Yuji. That's awesome that you're able to just do it on your own and still provide that to those families. So that's wonderful.
I would encourage those families to write to the superintendent
Oh,
themselves.
that's a great idea.
Yeah, Christy,
Mhm.
great idea.
Oh, thank you, Christy. That's wow. You know what? Yeah, I do not even have an opportunity to argue with this superintendent. I never met him, do not know him, right? So yeah, so this is a very brilliant idea. Okay, I need to write it down.
We're training parent advocates, right? Aren't we? So that's part, that's part of it.
Sorry, I unmuted myself. Yes, that is a brilliant idea. I didn't even have an opportunity to talk to the superintendent. I never met him. I do not know him. I do not have chance to argue with him. But these parents, they know their voice can be more important. Thank you so much, Christy.
We're also planning for fall, and it feels overwhelming and exciting and at the same time. And every day people are counting down and I think, oh, but I have to get all my work done in that amount of time then, like it feels like a crunch, but it's going fairly well. But we are finally going to offer a Spanish speaking parent group next year. And so if any of you have, I posted it on the Facebook page too, but like the best Spanish resources, it'll be, if we find a bilingual person, that'll be great. But if we don't, we have options for a co-taught situation with a cultural family advocate position. So I'm excited about that. And we have someone who's recruited families for us already. But I feel a little like we should have done this 10 years ago, but we're doing it now. And just if you have any ideas around that, I sure would be excited to hear those.
St. Paul has had, Spanish speaking classes for a long time, and they've had a sort of a mobile Spanish speaking parenting educator who's gone from site to site. As a teacher, I think her life is hell personally, because there'll be like 2 classes over here and 3 classes over here and 1 class over there, and this one in the morning and then that one over there at nighttime. But she's gone around to meet needs. And one of our former graduates from Minnesota, Jennifer Davis, is in St. Paul, and she's the Spanish speaking teacher now. So just saying, if it's at all useful to you, Christy, you may want to make some connections with St. Paul about their sort of history providing Spanish language classes, and also in coordination with their ESL classes and their family literacy program. So those other parts of ECFE that are not like just traditional parent classes, but sort of connect with other services.
We have a really strong family literacy program. We have 3 full classrooms that we collaborate with ABE, but we have always wanted to do a traditional model class in Spanish language. So thank you for that. I will reach out.
Oh, sorry. Are you planning on having an interpreter for parent ed?
I'd like it to be more a co-taught situation than an interpreter, so it's more culturally responsive. And we have someone who works with us as an independent contractor interpreter, but she goes way above and beyond. Like, she contacts families, registrations going on. Did you get your paperwork in? Like, there's no triangle happening. We just give her agency to be able to work with the families. And of course, the licensure thing is an issue, right? So I sort of envision it as more a co-taught situation than a
So are you thinking then that
interpreter.
so what would the staff look like? And the reason I ask is because in Northfield, we had a very strong family lit program, but it was not just Spanish speaking families. We had
Mhm.
Hmong families, we had Russian families once, we had Japan and Arab, families speaking Arabic. But unfortunately, our EA was Latino, and she would speak Spanish to the Spanish speaking families. And as hard as I tried, I'm like, we cannot do that. We cannot choose a language in this class and speak that language when the Japanese families aren't hearing their, so then all those families fell away because I think they were hearing Spanish more than they were hearing English. So we finally just made it a Spanish speaking only class. It has completely fizzled, but I think it's because we don't have an interpreter for parent ed. So I'm really curious to hear how you are going to do like a co-taught thing. So explain to me like the model and what that's going to look like.
Well, I can't yet because we're inventing it right now.
So co-taught in terms of, would you separate? Would you not separate?
Oh, yeah. So it would be a traditional, it's going to be 2 hours long, and it would be traditional interaction. We are fortunate to have one Spanish speaking teaching assistant on our staff, and I envision, that would be one of her assignments. And then there would be a parent educator and a cultural family advocate that I see advising the early childhood experience, but also working alongside a parent educator to plan and implement what's happening in the parent room.
So basically there'd be 4 staff: EA, parent ed, early childhood teacher, cultural liaison.
Yes, depending on the numbers, there could be 2.
Right.
EA, I assume, is TA for us. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, TA. Yeah.
Could be 2 TAs.
Okay.
So we would want to I'm going to recruit to have, like, if we had a bilingual parent educator, early childhood teacher, obviously that would be
I
key,
was
but
just
we,
gonna
yeah.
put in my little experience in St. Paul, but with being on the Parent Advisory Council, there was big concern when there was, and I don't know if this is the same teacher that Susan was referring to, but someone was retiring and a new Spanish speaking parent educator was going to be hired. And there was huge concern among the Spanish speaking families that this wouldn't just be even someone who was bilingual, but this would be someone who was Hispanic. Because the cultural piece was so important. It wasn't just you speak the language. So that's where having an interpreter is like so much better than not having anything, right? And having a teacher who themselves speak Spanish is so much better than having an interpreter. But if there's any way to get a parent educator who's from the culture that you're reaching out to, like, that was just enormously important to this group of parents who were actively involved in ECFE. They were just such an awesome group, and they just wanted to make sure their voices were heard. We need this. We parent differently. We have a different community. And so I know it's the licensure part is just really hard. Like, you can find someone who's talented and passionate and connected, but going through 2 years of schooling to get a parent ed license is no small thing.
That's why I kind of envisioning it being co-taught with the licensure person, but really growing the Latina or Latino person. I agree that it should be someone from the community, and I have someone in mind, but I just hope. So yeah, that eventually that could be someone who's really integral on our staff. But yeah, I agree. It's more than language.
It is. And I always feel like there's my first year, the adult basic ed teacher would sit in on parent ed with me. And so she was kind of that cultural liaison because she'd been teaching ABE for so long. And it was really nice having her there, but she didn't interpret. But once she was gone, then I felt like I was just swimming in an ocean and telling like it's so different. So I kind of feel like if I'm ever going to do that class again, I have to have an interpreter or a cultural liaison, because I kind of feel like it's pointless. And they don't like to interpret for each other. And that's not the role of a parent. A parent should not be interpreting for other parents. And that's kind of what I was stuck with. And I don't want to do that again, but I don't really know how to make that happen, because it's, it comes down to budgets too.
Well, and I'll say in St. Paul, that parenting educator also was very often put on the front line in being a translator, and that wasn't her role, right? But she was the one that was available. And so, I would, like, when we were developing Parentopia, I would go to Parent Advisory Council meetings, and she would translate. She would be there, right? And then as the teacher, as the staff that were present, but then she also was sort of tasked with being the translator for the Spanish speaking parents. And it just put, it wasn't fair to her. And so, the schools just needed way more resources to support the families.
But also I want to say that the benefit of having that person who can step in as that resource, even though it's not really fair to her, like how grateful when you don't have the resources it is to have somebody who is willing and can, even if it's not really their role to do it. We do not get the support for dual language here at all, and we have multiple different languages, and a lot of times even in our elementary schools they still don't have anyone who can do any, and almost all of our people who have stepped in is somebody from that community who eventually gets comfortable enough, and eventually they're like, okay, I'll step in and I'll be that for you guys because you don't have anyone. So
yeah, and then we wonder why school teachers are so reluctant at parent-teacher conferences with parents who represent non-white culture, so that if it starts early with the lack of resources to help families feel connected at schools and schools with families, then that divide just gets wider and wider. And then the teachers don't understand about the family's culture, right? They make their own assumptions or whatever. And the families don't feel like the schools really care. And so then as they move forward, it's just like, okay, I'm just going to do this parent-teacher conference and I'll go with my arms crossed. I'm going to bring the teenager, he can do the translation. And, the divide is just stronger. So it would be wonderful if there were more resources, especially in early childhood, because this is the time that parents are gaining, that sense of trust.
And also, I'll just add to that in my experience, if I've worked with parents who themselves are not familiar at all with the American public school system, and the trust, like it's not just, it's lack of trust. It's feeling like even the early childhood screening, they can at times misunderstand to be like a admissions exam for kindergarten or an adequacy test. I mean, there's so many places where the opportunities to build trust present themselves in early childhood, and they are not well fielded. They're not taken advantage of, in my experience. I've had I've had interpreters chime in with their own parenting advice and help themselves to snack too. And I was like, oh, okay, that's.
We had trouble with that in the class that I did my student teaching in, a Somali class with an interpreter who the interpreter was just kind of putting herself in there as part of the class and side conversations. It was just like, whoa, it was really easy to lose the class. Yeah, so it was important, and there was that cultural piece, but it was also really difficult because she was not the parent educator. So finding those roles and balancing them out is difficult.
Well, and that's hard when it is somebody who's just stepping into this and doesn't have that type of background. I had interpreters in screening who are telling the kids, no, what she wants you to do is exactly this. You pick like they're telling them all the answers to it. I'm like, no, you can't tell them. Just repeat exactly what I say. That's all I need you to say to them. So it's just that understanding of what it is too that is there. But I wanted to kind of add on to what Sarah was saying, like that relationship. Early childhood is really the foundation to that relationship, that foundation to that trust, and getting them off in the right steps to the rest of their school career. We're a big stepping stone into how the rest of it is going to go. So, yeah.
I'm coming into this a little bit later, but one of the things that I've found is how important it's been for me to build a relationship with the interpreter or the cultural liaison, because like we just had an instance this week where the interpreter was able to kind of have a side conversation with the parent, and I understand most Spanish, so I could understand it, but basically was reassuring her that like I'm an okay school person, and that I'm not going to go tell everybody else.
Yep.
Like that, I'm not going to go tell the special ed teacher down the hall, like this is just us as adults. But what it's meant is like over the years, I have done parent education for the interpreter. Like I've assisted her with her family, but that has built my credibility. And now it's okay for some of these other people because she says it's okay. And so I think that's the other, like, it's kind of, I'm thinking, how do we teach this to future parent educators or other teachers? Like, you know, I remember hearing you need to be on good terms with the custodian and the kitchen staff when I was an elementary teacher. And I feel like now we have to realize like we have to go the extra mile with our cultural liaisons because they are our link, and if we don't have it, like they'll close the door. Like they won't. We have one liaison who won't work with one person because that, you know, like, and again, culturally, I have found sometimes those doors close quickly and don't open back up differently than other relationships. So there's my 20 cents.
I've even as a lesson had invited Edina had our cultural liaisons come into the parent ed room as a topic for the week, regardless of the makeup of the class of parents, because I felt it was so important to have all parents in the district understand the level of investment and commitment that the district had made to supporting all parents. And I don't know if the parents who would have been paired with each, you know, of the cultural liaisons at that point knew of them or not, but I certainly wanted to make sure that our Spanish speakers knew that Blanca was there and et cetera, right? But I think it's a great lesson plan. Like, look at this awesome resource that our district has invested in, because all families, you know, deserve to have an on-ramp into the district that feels comfortable and sensitive for them. So, and you know, there are plenty of parents, mainstream parents, who had no idea and wouldn't have occurred to them. And, you know, so I would recommend that too as a learning opportunity for all parents. If your district has a team of cultural liaisons, get them in there and invite them to the conversation about what their job looks like and how they support families. I should also say that I have had absolutely wonderful interpreters who've been like who've added, who I've delighted in and with, and have taught me a million things about. I'm thinking of a Korean interpreter specifically. I learned so much from this man, and he developed a friendship with the mom he was supporting, and it was delightful. And he would bring me articles about Korean parenting stuff. I mean, it was really fun, and I learned so much. And so that the partnerships can really work depending on. The other dynamic that I'll just name, as long as we're talking about this, is the dynamic where you have a parent at your table interpreting because you've asked her or him to or not, for another parent whose English skills are different. But there can be like funny cultural hierarchies, status hierarchies between parents. For example, like South Asian parents, there are, certainly in South Asia, in India, there are hierarchies, right, that I am clueless about. And so I think that can actually trip switches of like comfort or discomfort, power over one parent. Like, you don't even know what you're stepping into when you ask one, just because they speak the same language doesn't mean that they are equipped to support each other necessarily in their learning and feel comfortable in that give and take dynamic. So that would be another thing that I would, another way to step in it that I would encourage you to avoid.
Yeah, I've had some experiences with that as well. And sometimes families will say, no, I don't want an interpreter because of that. They don't want to risk someone outside their caste, for lack of a better, and East African also. So, and sometimes I'll say, you know, that I need an interpreter to express what I need to express to you, but they will often say, no, thank you. And also they don't, like, it's a close-knit community, so they don't want people in their business. And so sometimes when you think, well, they said they don't want an interpreter, and I wish they would, just to honor, you know, we will do our best, you know, with what we're doing with English. The other thing I've done with interpreters, you always find, well, we're fortunate here because we have some we can choose among. We have our favorites, and Karen can probably speak to that too. But I have a conversation, if it's someone new, ahead of time. Like, I ask them to come ahead of time, or I call them the day before, because I want to know what I'm stepping in, as you say, Sarah, like, but I will ask them to interpret to me prior. Like, they'll say, you use this word, is it okay if I put cultural context around that? And I'll tell you, you know, and I'm like, yes, of course. But there's always this back and forth of, if there's a side conversation or they have something cultural going on, that there are interpreters who have that understanding of, I'm going to explain that to you as the white English speaker. And when you have that kind of back and forth with an interpreter, it is so awesome.
As you guys were talking about that, you know, the relationships that are kind of already established, it made me consider, I've always seen just this huge benefit of the fact that a lot of our success coaches end up, that's what we call our cultural liaisons or success coaches. They come out of their community. It's often a member of the group that has come here together. And I've always seen such a benefit to that. But as you talked about that, I actually see that there could be some hangups on that as well, because, oh, it's so-and-so, they already tell me how to parent at home. I don't want to go in and have them interpret for me. Like, I've never thought of that before, but because they have those pre-existing relationships, it really could be a hindrance to them being the people that would be the interpreters for that situation.
Well, I just
We
think
have
about,
a tight Russian community too. And I actually had a parent say, okay, I know this interpreter, like, in, you know, as best she could communicate to me. I know this interpreter, and I want you to say that this is a confidential conversation and she can't talk about me anywhere else, you know? So once I said that, then she was okay with it. There's so many intricacies.
It kind of
But
reminds me when you said, I'm sorry. You okay? It reminds me, Melissa, when you say that, to remember that parents coming into our group all have different reasons. Even like those who came this spring in January, I found that those who came in January or those who came in September, the ones that came in person during a pandemic, they have a different reason for being there, or a comfort level, or they might not, like you said, when Melissa, when you said it, I was thinking, maybe they're the rebels of the group. That's why they're coming. They want to do something different. I don't know. You don't know. You know what I'm saying? As a rebel is a really sweet thing. I love rebels because they make things happen. But anyway, I love that idea of thinking maybe this person's coming outside of their group because they want more information differently. You know, so we have to talk about the layers, right? Talk about the need for interpersonal relationships with all of our families, however we can make that work. Because for us to then make an assumption that they're, you know, we can make an assumption the way to be really overly sensitive and they're just wanting to break out. I don't know. I'm just saying, right? When you said it, Melissa, that's what I thought of. Oh, anyway.
I think that's really valid. I mean, you're considering that we're making an assumption that they want us to only talk to them at what their cultural level is and follow their cultural norms. But you're absolutely right. They might be simply there because they want to know, well, how do you do it as Americans? I want to know the difference and how and why you're doing it. I think that's super valid, Greta.
We had some parents who were choosing to not be in a culture specific class for that reason in St. Paul, who are coming to the general birth to 5 normal group for exactly that reason. They're like, we're here now and we want to know how Americans parent and we are trying to, you know, be part of this new culture. So yeah, people have different needs and different, like you said, Greta, reasons that they're coming, right?
Yeah, even just maybe they don't want to become it, but they want to understand what they're experiencing out there every day, right? Or
And what they're
what their kids are experiencing.
Right.
They just want to understand it, maybe.
One of the things, a question came up for me as we're talking about this is, you know, the reality that like we have some people, like they're saying they might not want to come to a class if they have a previous relationship with an interpreter what I wondered is like, sometimes I worry as being the only parent educator, like what if I'm a barrier? You know what I mean? Like that they know, like, well, I either have a class with Lorraine or I don't have a class at all and she doesn't get me, or they feel, you know, like any thoughts on like those layers of these invisible barriers that we almost aren't in control of? Maybe I'm thinking too much.
It reminds me of Lorraine when I was a parent educator before I had kids. Right? Like, what am I doing here? Right? So it reminds me of my thoughts then was I got to rely on the research. I got to go back to content and always say, and this is something about me that I think, or this is, you know, this seems to make sense to me, but this is what, you know, always pointing back as best we can and trying to get material that is sensitive and it's well researched, right, for our culture. It's not perfect, but I feel like that's a responsibility, right? As yeah, kind of like you always put up the disclaimer. This is coming through me, right? It's coming through me. But I want you to know that the research is here. You can find it and whatever. And even the research is coming through a lens, right? So anyway, those are the things that come up in my head when you say that.
I connect with that a lot. Small district. There's me and one other. And I often get the question, which one of you is teaching it? And I'm like, ooh.
Oh man. Oh, ouch.
Well, I've gotten that just this week too, because people are signing up for next fall, and there's a few of us parent educators in my district. We find out what classes we're going to teach the week before it starts. So Like we
Mhm.
don't get assigned our classes until the very end of August. I have no clue what classes I'm going to have next year. So that just is kind of similar, Lorraine, to what you're looking at, even though you're the only one. It's like we can only control what's in our control, right? And it's
That's
just
right.
like we just do our best to be authentic and caring and point to the research, and then it's on them. Like we can
Mhm.
only do, we can't be everything to everybody. And mostly I've had parents ask because I'm choosing to believe that they want to be in my class, but it's just like I can't tell them. So I'm like, hopefully we'll have the same class, but we can't
Well,
control everything.
And I can say that I did, somehow with the way the brochure came out, like my name as a parent educator wasn't listed. And I did have somebody say, well, I looked and your name wasn't on any classes. And so they didn't, this was a teen mom and she didn't want to sign up if I wasn't going to be there. So,
Mm.
I mean, that's a plus, but it's also like, then it's like, okay, now we got to work on our inside work of making sure the names are all there, because that was then a barrier for this mom because she didn't see my name. So
This, I think many of you are acquainted with this book, and the cultural responsive teaching in the brain. And there's a chapter that I'm remembering. I did another little lesson plan rooted in chapter 2, and it lists, let's see, it's a hierarchy of individualism to, not a hierarchy, it's a spectrum of individualism to collectivism by nationality in here. So guess who's at the top of individualism? US. Right. And then it goes across the spectrum. And I had people look at this list and think about, talked about what individualism and collectivism was, look at this list, think about what they claim for their cultural identities and where that would kind of put them on the spectrum and how that impacts our thinking about, and I have my notes here, sleep, eating, power struggles, self-sufficiency, separating, play, self-regulation, gender norms, like all the parenting is so cultural, and norms impact so much of how we approach the way that we coach and guide our kids. And so it was a rich exchange, I think, for everybody, hopefully most people, which is all you can hope for, in the class that day. And I'm so glad we're having this talk. Good talk, because I had sort of forgotten about that. Now it's at the top of my pile again.
And that just brings to mind Susan's comment about how even when you try to just point to the research is often culturally bubbled off, right? So if you're only doing research about people with European backgrounds in the United States in certain communities, the research is only going to say so much, and how much is going to be appropriate or applicable. Yeah.
A couple years ago,
I would love to see that lesson, Sarah, that you did. That sounds wonderful.
it does. I did a couple of years ago in my Latino family school class, spanking came up. And so I pointed to the research, and I just talked about, just all the things that spanking, children, if it worked, they would stop doing it, and of course, but I also didn't have an interpreter. So I don't really know how much of it got through. But after that, I had a mom stop coming. And I talked to our EA who makes the phone calls, and she wouldn't come and she wouldn't come and she wouldn't come. And then finally I found out she didn't come because she didn't like that I told her she wasn't allowed to spank her kids. And I said, I never said that. I never said, don't spank your kids. But I said, there are some other tools that you can use in your toolbox. I don't think I said toolbox because that doesn't translate right. But basically I just said there are some different ways. And if you're looking for some different ways, I'm happy to help you, find some of those ways in practice. And again, it was like the last 5 minutes of class, and I had 5 minutes to be like, okay, we're gonna do this. But yeah, so she stopped coming because she did not like when I said that, the research said that spanking was not beneficial for children. So
This is a big reason why I've, like on teaching parenting styles, everything like leans towards authoritative parenting. But there's in the traditional parenting, I've got all of these kids in my classes that are Somali kids and, whatnot. And in their homes, there's definitely a power hierarchy and there's, it's very authoritarian. And for me to sit there going, they'll translate that like you have bad parents, when I know they don't have bad parents. They've got fabulous parents, and so I think sometimes it is on us as well to dig deeper into the literature, for instance, on spanking in the African-American community, right? The use of spanking is like not a big deal, like yelling at your kids is not a big deal. And if we translate that out to sort of long-term effects, it's not due to the spanking or to the yelling, it's economics, right? Or it's education, or it's living in violent neighborhoods or whatever. And the research that's been done around, spanking in African-American families is that it's a discipline strategy, but it isn't harmful. It isn't, it's part of demonstrating love, but it's, and from our, side of it, we may disagree and go, I would never hit my kids. But again, it's that translation issue and because what's the long-term strategy? The long-term strategy isn't to get families to agree with you. It's for them to learn, be critically thinking, for them to understand their own practices, put it in context, take it out to their own communities, have conversations and so forth, right?
And that's where having a cultural liaison is huge because, that was I think my first or second year working with Latino families. And this is another, we talk about home visiting, I feel like is one of those areas where I'm woefully unprepared. I was woefully unprepared to be dumped into a class with Latino families. So it's just one of those things where you don't know what you don't know until you're in that situation and you handle it the best way you can. Like Greta said, point to the research. But yeah.
Well, and
go ahead, Melissa.
Okay, I was just gonna say I've had a parent come straight up to me about the thinking thing, and there's no cultural difference from fully anyway. And they came right in, and on one of the very first, they clearly the wife had drug him along and said, well, I suppose you're going to tell us that we're bad parents because we spank our kids, huh? Like that was one of the first things he said to me. And I was like, I have no intention of saying that to you. And that's the thing is like, there's so much when you get into parenting that culturally doesn't necessarily mean the color of your skin or it's the way you were raised. It's who raised you and it's how those practices went into place. And it doesn't necessarily have something, not nothing, it definitely has something to do, but it doesn't have it's not always so obvious that there are going to be those cultural differences. Sometimes those are under the surface and you're not going to be aware. And so that's where it's always in the practice to always be in, like what you said, Susan, what the purpose isn't for you to agree to me. It's for you to find intentionality. The reason I'm sharing this information with you is, do you know why are you spanking because your parents spanked? Or are you spanking because this is the benefits that you see in it and what you want from it, and that is the purpose you're doing it from? And I think if we all as parent educators keep the fact that the reason I'm a parent educator is because I want you to think critically about how you're a parent, we're going to find that purpose. Like all I want you to do is be intentional in how you're parenting. The choices that you make are yours. The way you decide to do that are 100% yours. I'm just here to give you more information if you want some.
Thanks, Melissa. I think that's fabulous. The other element of this from the teaching or the education standpoint is that conversation across parents about diversity of practices, so that they can hear, because part of it when you're talking, I'm thinking, that, you know, because you can have an individual parent reflect on his or her practices, but she can go back into her own community and the old practices are going to be strongly reinforced. It's going to be, you know, so we're always aware of that social context. On the other hand, you know, having that open conversation in a classroom about practices can really, I think, be very eye-opening and again, boost that sense of acceptance by across parents, so that there's, you know, when you talk about judgment. So, you know, the last place a parent wants to walk is into an area that is highly judgy. And especially I think for disenfranchised or minority parents who walk in, and the majority of the parents are white moms, right? They're going to go, oh man, they are completely going to judge me. I'm not going to say anything. And so encouraging that conversation, you know, I've heard from families about how they really appreciate it because they gained a deeper understanding about the cultural practices around parenting or whatever within that community, because they could have that in a space where they weren't feeling. And I'm sure, you know, Karen, you must get this all the time with your work on race, right? The other thing I was just going to note is, so we're talking about this in the face-to-face. I will also tell you that there are these cultural clashes online. When we first developed Parentopia, I was working with the West Side at Belvedere, which has some Spanish speaking classes and English speaking classes. And so in the online space, right, it was just like the Spanish speaking classes could continue to type and dialogue, right, in Spanish. And that was great. It kind of pushed us to see if we could figure out how to translate, and we didn't have that money, but Google does have a plugin that you can use that will translate a page. But one of the big cultural differences that, and again, sort of that thing about opening up conversation across families to express differences, was within the same center, or actually at that center, and then we moved over to another center at St. Paul and got a very different reaction. So we found that the Spanish-speaking families loved sharing pictures of their children. They loved it, and other families loved it because they would report about feeling really engaged. And the parents, of course, were so proud of their kids, right? We didn't even think about it. It was just like, great, this is a platform for sharing and community engagement, and everybody, you know, learning across cultures, and the families that are not in the Spanish speaking classes being able to connect with, you know, the other families and yada, yada. We were over in another part of St. Paul, and the Parent Advisory Council parents were like all about privacy and security and protecting the identities of their kids. And I'm not saying this because I disagree with it, of course, right? It was just a completely different perspective. And so again, now as we move into the online space, those conversations about what is appropriate for you, what do you feel comfortable doing if you're part of the community, how do we set those ground rules again where, you know, everyone feels comfortable, so nobody feels shamed for sharing a picture of their own child or something like that, and someone doesn't feel shamed for being picky because they don't want their kid's face being used. So I know I'm adding on top of it, but
no, but that's
the
crazy.
reality.
I think that's what is at the heart of it. Like, I really think that creating environment, like the magic that we, as we get better at what we're doing, because I don't have it yet, have to bring a group together and really truly make it a safe place for everybody. Like, that is such a powerful, beautiful thing. And whether it's posting pictures or being open to talk about spanking, like honestly, one of the most meaningful cultural classes I had was as a parent in St. Paul when spanking came up. And this one mom who I'm still Facebook friends with, and I just love her to death, right? Raised in Vietnam. And she was just like, I need to understand this because I don't understand this. And now I don't know how to parent. Like, and she was so vulnerable, and she was so just like open with, in my culture, from birth to 5, you spank. And if you don't spank, you don't love your kid. Like, it is a 1-to-1. You don't care if you don't spank. And then after age 5, you don't spank because, like, I don't know, she had like a whole lot of specific reasons, very purposeful, very, very cultural. And it was such a beautiful dialogue of her openness, being able to share that instead of shutting down and feeling like she had heard a message of this isn't allowed, so now I don't know how to parent. Like, but it's that work we have to do every single class, right? Of like making this a place where it's okay to share and you're not going to be judged, but you got to figure out your own right answer. Like, I feel like almost every single week in some way comes up, you need to take this and find the answer that works for you and your family, right? That it's not, this is the way to do it and this is the way that's wrong. But that's the juggling act we have as teachers, right? Of trying to find that way to create that environment for our families that they feel safe to be themselves.
Well, on that note, what a lovely way to our meeting. I just looked up and I realized that it's like 1 o'clock. Well, thank you, everybody. This was fabulous. I'll post the recording as always. Any final thoughts, questions, concerns, joys before we close today?
Thank you, Susan, for inviting us to the International Day of Family. And I have watched part of the presentation and finding it helpful because I'm looking at online safety and pornography and things as we wrap up the school year. And so some more reminders, Common Sense Media, and there were a couple new ones that you had on there from other countries that I appreciated. So thank you for that work.
You're welcome. Thanks for logging in. And anytime, you guys just know, right? Anytime you have questions about this stuff or, you know, resources or whatever, like I'm there for you. So.
Bye, everyone.
Happy weekend, everybody. See you later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.